young woman who arrived on rollerblades for her interview fascinated the millionaire who told her, "If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. We continue." The alarm hadn't yet rung when Emily opened her eyes on that decisive Monday. The dark Chicago sky barely allowed the first rays of sunlight to pass between the buildings of Oakwood Heights, the neighborhood on the outskirts where she had lived since birth. Her 23 years carried the weight of responsibilities that seemed to double her age, but also brought the strength of someone who had learned to transform obstacles into stepping stones. She got up silently so as not to wake her grandmother, Mrs. Betty, who was sleeping in the room next door. The elderly woman had been her only family since her parents left to try their luck abroad more than a decade ago and never sent news. The cold shower was her daily ritual, not by choice but because the heater had broken months ago, and her salary as a bakery attendant barely covered the basic bills. While getting ready, Emily observed the only luxury she allowed herself, a wall of magazine clippings filled with images of Walker Corporation, one of the country's largest technology companies. There was her dream, materialized in photos of modern offices and headlines about innovation. That morning, for the first time, this dream seemed a little less distant. "Today's the day," she whispered to herself, adjusting the only blouse she owned, a gift from her teacher at the technical administration course. The piece had been bought at a thrift store, but Emily kept it impeccable, saving it for a special occasion, like this one. Her routine was precise mathematics. Wake up at 5 a.m., work at the bakery from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., then rush to the call center, where she was an attendant from 3 p.m. to 9 p.m., and still find energy to attend technical course classes until 11 p.m. On weekends, she did typing gigs and studied basic programming through free videos on the internet. But that Monday, her routine would be different. She had managed to switch shifts at the bakery to be able to attend the interview at Walker. An opportunity that came after months of sending resumes and standing out in an online selection process. It was her golden chance, and Emily knew it. With her backpack on her shoulders, the same one she had used since high school, she went down the small two-story house stairs. On the ground floor, her old bicycle waited for her, as every morning. However, when she touched the front tire, her heart froze. It was completely empty. It wasn't a small puncture that could hold until night. It was a considerable tear. Despair began to take over. Her emergency reserve had been used to buy medicine for her grandmother the previous week. Public transportation would take too long and make her arrive late. It was then that, searching through an old cabinet, she found a pair of rollerblades that she had received one distant Christmas when her parents were still around. "It's crazy," she thought as she wiped the dust off the rollerblades, but it was also crazy to give up on her dream because of a flat tire. She put on the rollerblades, which by miracle still fit, although tight. She kept a pair of flats in her backpack and, after taking 3 deep breaths, opened the gate. The city was beginning to wake up when Emily glided for the first time that morning. The asphalt was still wet from the previous night's drizzle, and her movements were initially unsure. But as she advanced, the old skill from her teenage years came back. The wheels cut through the cool morning air as she balanced between cars and buses. The sun was already higher when she spotted the imposing Walker building, with its glass walls reflecting the Chicago sky. She stopped at a nearby plaza, changed the rollerblades for shoes, and tried to catch her breath. Her face was red from the effort, and some strands of hair had escaped from the meticulously made bun hours earlier. She looked at her reflection in a store window. It wasn't exactly the image she had planned for her most important interview, but there was something in her eyes, a mixture of determination and authenticity that no designer suit could buy. The Walker Corporation lobby was a world apart. The Italian marble floor reflected the lights like a water mirror, and the air conditioning created a controlled atmosphere that contrasted brutally with the city's humid heat. Emily observed the other candidates. All wore impeccable suits and carried genuine leather portfolios. Instinctively, she held her worn backpack tighter, where the rollerblades made a telltale bulge. "Emily Porter," called a receptionist with a crystalline voice. As she stood up, Emily noticed the strange looks from the other candidates. Her face was still flushed from the morning adventure, and some drops of sweat insisted on appearing on her forehead, despite the refrigerated environment. She was led down a corridor that seemed endless, its walls decorated with portraits of previous company presidents. In the last one, she recognized the face she had seen so many times in reports. Richard Walker, the current CEO of the company, known for his discretion and business genius. The meeting room where she was taken had a panoramic view of the city. Chicago stretched as far as the eye could see, a concrete jungle that Emily had just crossed on rollerblades. The irony almost made her smile. "Miss Porter," the deep voice surprised her. She turned and found in flesh and blood Richard Walker. He was standing at the door, observing her with an expression that mixed curiosity and something else that she couldn't identify. "Yes, sir," she responded, trying to control the tremor in her voice. Walker entered the room, followed by two people whom Emily recognized as company directors by the badges they wore. "Before we begin," said Walker, sitting, "I'd like to know how you got here today." His tone was casual, but his eyes were perceptive. Emily hesitated for a moment. Should she lie? Invent a more appropriate story for that corporate environment? But something inside told her that her real story, however unlikely it might seem, was her greatest strength. "I came on rollerblades, sir," she answered, keeping her gaze steady. "My bicycle had a problem, and I couldn't afford to be late." A heavy silence fell over the room. The directors exchanged barely disguised looks of disapproval, but Walker smiled, an almost imperceptible smile, but one that reached his eyes. "Show me the rollerblades," he asked, to everyone's surprise. Emily, with slightly trembling hands, opened her backpack and removed the worn rollerblades. Walker examined them carefully, as if they were a valuable relic. "You know, Miss Porter, 30 years ago I also used rollerblades," he revealed, to general surprise. "Not by choice, but by necessity. I delivered flyers to help my mother with the bills. People laughed, but I learned that necessity makes us creative." The atmosphere in the room subtly changed. Emily felt as if an invisible connection had been established between her and that powerful man. It wasn't pity she saw in his eyes, it was recognition. "Now," continued Walker, returning the rollerblades, "tell me about your solution to the logistics problem we presented in the online test." Emily took a deep breath and began to explain. She talked about how she had thought of a solution based on her real experience, as an attendant, as a student, as someone who knew firsthand the difficulties of public transportation. Her presentation was simple, without elaborate jargon, but loaded with practical knowledge and data that she had exhaustively researched. When she finished, she realized she had spoken for almost 20 minutes without interruption. Walker observed her with genuine interest while the directors furiously took notes on their tablets. "Interesting," murmured Walker, leaning back in his chair. "Very interesting. Your approach is different from what we're used to." Emily didn't know if this was good or bad, but she was proud of having been authentic, of having remained true to who she was, even in that intimidating environment. The days following the interview were the longest in Emily's life. Each phone call at the bakery made her heart race. Each email that arrived in her inbox was opened with trembling fingers. The weight was corroding her peace of mind, but she remained firm in her routine: bakery, call center, technical course, studies on weekends. Mrs. Betty noticed her granddaughter's anxiety and tried to distract her with stories from her youth, when she too had faced prejudices and difficulties as a black woman trying to establish herself as a seamstress in Chicago. "My daughter," she would say while preparing a strong coffee on a Saturday morning, "sometimes the highest walls are those we cannot see." Emily understood well what her grandmother meant. During the interview at Walker, despite the apparent connection with Richard Walker, she had felt the director's looks, that mixture of discomfort and condescension that she knew so well. It was the same look she received when she entered expensive stores to buy presents for her grandmother, or when she sat in the best seats on the bus. At the bakery, her boss, Mrs. Donner, had become a sort of involuntary confidant. "You have every right to dream big, girl," she would say as they organized the shelves before opening. "But don't let anyone convince you that you don't deserve to get there." It was on a rainy Tuesday that the email arrived. Emily was on her break at the call center, hurriedly eating a sandwich when her phone vibrated. The message was from Walker, but it wasn't what she expected. "We appreciate your interest. Very competitive selection process. Unfortunately." Words became jumbled on the screen as her eyes filled with unshed tears. That night at the technical course, her teacher Jennifer noticed her dejection. After class, she called Emily for a conversation. "Tell me what happened," she asked with that gentleness that was her trademark. Emily opened up, telling about the interview, the rollerblades, the apparent connection with the CEO, and finally, the rejection. "You know what I think," said Jennifer, after listening attentively. "I think you scared them. Not for lack of competence, but for excess of authenticity. Some companies say they want innovation, but they get scared when it shows up on rollerblades and without pedigree." Emily laughed, even though she didn't want to. It was a bitter laugh, but necessary. "And what do I do now?" she asked, more to herself than to the teacher. "Now," replied Jennifer, taking a book from her bag, "you study more because knowledge is the only thing that no one can take from you." The book was about advanced programming, something Emily had been trying to learn on her own. "It's borrowed," Jennifer added with a smile, "but you can keep it as long as you need." In the following days, Emily immersed herself even deeper in her studies. In the early morning hours, after returning from the course, she devoured the programming book. During breaks at the call center, she watched video lessons on her phone. At the bakery, between one customer and another, she mentally practiced codes. Her determination caught the attention of Lucas, a regular customer at the bakery who worked with software development. Seeing her always with programming books, he began to exchange technical ideas with her during his breakfast. "You have a different way of thinking," he commented one day. "You see solutions where most people only see problems." What Emily didn't know was that, while she dedicated herself to overcoming the disappointment, her story was about to take an unexpected turn. At Walker, a board meeting was in progress, and her name had emerged in a heated discussion about the future of the company. The first time Emily saw her face on a customer's cell phone screen at the bakery, she thought she was having a hallucination. The lady, a retiree who always ordered toast in the Thursday mornings, widened her eyes when she recognized her and almost spilled her coffee. "It's you? The rollerblade girl!" exclaimed the lady, turning the cell phone screen so everyone could see. In the video recorded by someone from the Walker reception, Emily appeared arriving at the corporate building, changing the rollerblades for shoes with a dignity that contrasted with the unusual situation. The video had been posted on a social network with the caption, "While some complain about life, others do the impossible to achieve their dreams." This young woman arrived on rollerblades for a job interview at the country's largest technology company. In a matter of hours, the recording went viral. Thousands of shares, hundreds of thousands of likes. People began to create hashtags. The rollerblade girl, hire Emily, Walker, open your eyes. Employability blogs and news sites rushed to tell her story. Mrs. Donna, seeing the unusual movement in the bakery, now full of people who came more to see Emily than to buy bread, decided to give her a few days off. "Go organize this mess, girl, and don't forget us when you get famous." At home, Emily tried to process it all. Her cell phone wouldn't stop ringing with calls from unknown numbers. Journalists wanted interviews, inspiration pages asked for testimonials, sports product companies probed possible partnerships. It was surreal. Her grandmother observed everything with a mixture of pride and concern. "My granddaughter," she would say, "you're stirring up something bigger than you. You're showing these people that talent doesn't choose its cradle." At the call center, the situation became unsustainable. Customers recognized her by her voice and diverted calls from the original subject to ask about her story. Her supervisor, a traditionally strict man, called her for a conversation. To her surprise, it wasn't a warning. "Emily," he said with unusual seriousness, "you're inspiring people. My daughter saw your video and said she wants to be like you when she grows up. She's 10 years old." The supervisor's words hit her like a punch in the stomach. Until that moment, Emily had no dimension of the impact her story was causing. It was no longer just about her or a job vacancy. It was about hope, about breaking barriers, about showing that dreams don't need a zip code to exist. In the midst of all this turmoil, one comment in particular caught her attention. It was from a Walker employee, written on her personal page. "I've worked at the company for 15 years and never seen the board so divided. This girl's video is making everyone rethink our selection processes. Some directors are furious, others are calling for an urgent reassessment. Richard Walker hasn't spoken yet, but they say he's been different since her interview." Emily kept that information carefully, without creating expectations. After all, she had already learned that viral moments pass, trending topics disappear, and real life continues with its bills to pay and its daily challenges. Lucas, the programmer customer from the bakery, appeared at her house one night, bringing his laptop. "I saw your video," he said, "and decided I need to do something. I'm going to teach you real programming, not this basic stuff from the tutorials. You have too much talent to be waiting for an opportunity. Let's create one." And so, while the virtual world buzzed with her story, Emily began to build something concrete. In her spare time, which was scarce, she learned the fundamentals of software development from Lucas. He was a demanding teacher, but patient, and was impressed by how quickly she absorbed the most complex concepts. In the meeting room on the 30th floor of Walker, the atmosphere was tense. Richard Walker observed the city through the panoramic windows, while listening to the raised voices of his directors. Emily's video had become an institutional problem, dividing opinions and questioning internal policies that had existed for decades. "We cannot let a viral video dictate our corporate decisions," argued Mark Reynolds, Human Resources Director, gesturing with a folder of documents. "We have established processes, rigorous criteria. If we yield now, what message will we send?" Helen Vasquez, Innovation Director, rolled her eyes. "The message that we're a 21st century company. Look at these comments on social media. It's not just about the rollerblade girl. It's about transformation, about opening doors to real talents, regardless of the packaging." Walker remained silent, his mind going back to that interview. There was something about Emily that intrigued him deeply. It wasn't just her story, which so resembled his own. It was her ability to think differently, to find solutions where others saw only problems. "Richard," called Sofia Torres, the executive vice president, "we need a position from you. The press won't stop calling. Employees are commenting. Our competitors are using this to promote themselves as more inclusive companies." Meanwhile, at the bakery, Emily was living her own whirlwind. The lessons with Lucas were advancing quickly, and she discovered she had a natural talent for programming logic. In 2 weeks, she had created her first application, a simple system that helped Mrs. Donner manage the bakery's inventory. "Do you have any idea how much this is going to make?" "My life easier?" exclaimed Mrs. Donner, amazed at the tablet that now showed all product movement. "Girl, you were born for bigger things." Mrs. Donner's words echoed in her mind as Emily continued her routine. At the call center, her supervisor had transferred her to the technical support sector, where she could use her new technology knowledge. At the technical course, Jennifer invited her to give a lecture about her experience to the other students. "But teacher, I didn't even get the position," protested Emily. "It's not about the position," replied Jennifer. "It's about not giving up, about reinventing yourself, about using each no as momentum to grow." The lecture was an unexpected success. Emily talked about her fears, her doubts, but mainly about how each obstacle had forced her to find creative solutions. The students bombarded her with questions, and many stayed after class to talk more. At home, Mrs. Betty observed the changes in her granddaughter with teary eyes. Emily was different, not just more confident, but more serene, as if she had found her true path. "You know, Grandma," said Emily one night, while helping the elderly woman with her medicines, "I think I finally understood what you always said about invisible walls. They're only invisible until we start breaking them." At Walker, the board meeting continued. Walker finally turned to face his directors, his expression determined. "You're all right," he said, surprising everyone. "And all wrong at the same time." "What do you mean?" questioned Mark Reynolds. "We're discussing the wrong person," continued Walker. "It's not about the rollerblade girl. It's about what she represents, about how many talents we lose because of our own prejudices disguised as established processes." Silence took over the room. Walker walked to the central table and opened his laptop. "I want to show you something," he said, projecting a series of graphs on the screen. "These are the results of the last 5 years. Innovation, creativity, disruptive solutions, all metrics are stagnant. Do you know why? Because we continue fishing in the same lake with the same bait." The app that Emily created for the bakery began to attract attention from other small businesses in the neighborhood. The butcher on the corner was the first to ask for an adapted version for his business. Then came the flower shop, the construction materials store, and even Mrs. Cindy's small market. Lucas observed his students' development with a mixture of pride and admiration. "You're not just programming," he said, as they reviewed the code for another adaptation of the system. "You're democratizing technology, bringing solutions to those who never had access to them." Lucas's words planted a seed in Emily's mind. During her breaks at the call center, she began to sketch a larger project, a platform that would allow small businesses to have access to simple and affordable management tools. "It's like I'm giving back to the community," she explained to her grandmother as she worked on her old laptop until late at night. "All this attention I received because of the video, I want to transform it into something concrete." Mrs. Betty smiled, adjusting the shawl on her shoulders. "Your mother would be proud of you, my child." She also had this gift of seeing beyond the obvious. The mention of her mother brought a lump to Emily's throat. It had been so long since she had heard from her, but there was no time for melancholy. Her project needed to move forward. One afternoon, while implementing new features in the flower shop system, Emily received an unexpected visit. Helen Vasquez, Walker's innovation director, was standing at the door of the shop, watching her work. "Impressive," said Helen, approaching. "In 2 weeks, you've done more for the digitization of local commerce than many startups do in months of development." Emily froze. How had Helen discovered her project? How did she know where to find her? "Relax," continued Helen, noticing her discomfort. "I'm not here officially. In fact, I came against HR's recommendations, but I needed to see with my own eyes." For the next 2 hours, Helen listened attentively as Emily explained her vision for the platform. The director asked insightful questions, took notes, suggested improvements. "You know what Walker's problem is," said Helen after a long silence. "We've become so focused on big solutions that we've forgotten about small revolutions. Look around. You're transforming lives with accessible technology." Before leaving, Helen left her card with Emily. "Keep developing your project, and don't be surprised if you receive some calls in the next few days." At Walker, the presentation to the directors had ended. Walker's words about innovation and stagnation still echoed through the room when Sofia Torres, the vice president, asked to speak. "Richard is right," she declared, "but we need to go beyond just recognizing the problem. We need concrete action." Mark Reynolds, the HR director, still resisted. "And what do you suggest? Ignore all our hiring protocols?" "No," replied Walker, a smile appearing on his lips. "Let's create new protocols. A new department, actually. Something that has never been done before in the American corporate market." The directors looked at each other, intrigued. Walker continued, "I want to create the Social and Technological Innovation Center, a department that will identify and develop unconventional talents, people who, like Emily, have potential, but haven't had the same opportunities as most of our employees." The proposal was bold, disruptive, and for some of those present, frightening. But Walker wasn't asking for permission. He was announcing a decision. The day dawned differently in the Oakwood Heights community. A van from the country's largest television network was parked in front of Mrs. Donna's bakery. The reporter, an elegant woman with a microphone in her hand, anxiously awaited Emily's arrival. "I can't believe you're going to be on TV," exclaimed Mrs. Donner, adjusting her apron and trying to organize the bakery for the cameras. "My bakery is going to be famous." Emily arrived at the usual time, 5:45 in the morning, her routine unchanged despite the excitement. The bicycle now, with the tire fixed thanks to a collection taken up by the bakery's customers, was parked in its usual place. "Emily Porter," began the reporter, "the rollerblade girl who conquered the internet and showed that determination has no social class. How do you feel being a symbol of overcoming for so many people?" The question caught Emily by surprise. Symbol of overcoming. She was just trying to survive, to do the best with what she had. But before she could answer, a small crowd began to form around the bakery. "She helped me computerize my flower shop," shouted Mrs. Rose, the florist. "Now I don't lose orders anymore." "The system she created doubled my sales," added Mr. George from the small market. The reporter, realizing there was an even bigger story there, began to interview the local merchants. Emily watched, partly embarrassed, partly proud, as her neighbors described how her work with technology was transforming the neighborhood. Lucas appeared during the recording carrying his laptop. "I came to show you something," he said, opening the computer. "Remember your idea for the platform for small businesses? I spent the weekend structuring the project. Look." On the screen, a detailed plan showed how the solution could be expanded to other neighborhoods, other cities. The reporter, who had silently approached, widened her eyes. "This is incredible," she exclaimed. "Do you have any idea of the impact this could have? How many small entrepreneurs could benefit?" On the other side of the city, in Richard Walker's office, the businessman watched the live report on his television. At his side, Helen Vasquez smiled with satisfaction. "See," she said, "while we were discussing selection processes, she was already out there making it happen, without resources, without corporate support, with nothing but determination and talent." Walker nodded, thoughtful. "And the most impressive thing is that she's not doing this to get attention or get a job. She genuinely wants to help her community." "That's exactly why we need her," replied Helen. "Not just for what she can do, but for what she represents. It's the change we talk so much about wanting, happening naturally." At the bakery, the report continued. The reporter was now interviewing Mrs. Betty, who had arrived in a hurry upon hearing about the commotion. "My granddaughter has always been like this," the lady was saying, her eyes shining with pride. "When she was little, she already fixed other children's toys, always thinking of others, always wanting to help." Emily listened to all of this with a lump in her throat. She thought about her parents, about how they would like to see where she had arrived. It wasn't exactly the path she had planned, but maybe it was even better. Her cell phone vibrated in her pocket. A message from an unknown number. "Miss Porter, this is Richard Walker's secretary. He would like to schedule a meeting with you for tomorrow at 10 a.m. Please confirm your availability." Emily read the message 3 times. Her heart raced. What could Richard Walker want with her now? Would it be another interview, a proposal, or perhaps... The night before the meeting with Walker was sleepless for Emily. Lying in her narrow bed, she mentally reviewed every line of code she had written, every solution she had implemented in the neighborhood businesses. Was it good? Enough? Was she prepared for whatever might come next? "Eat properly, girl," insisted Mrs. Betty the next morning, pushing a plate of pancakes in her direction. "Don't face an important day on an empty stomach." This time, Emily decided to take the bus to Walker. She wanted to arrive impeccable, professional. She wore the same blouse from the interview, no longer her only formal outfit, since her teacher Jennifer had insisted on taking her shopping for some basic pieces with the money she was earning from her technology projects. In the Walker lobby, the receptionist treated her differently this time. There were no more looks of bewilderment, only professional respect. "Mr. Walker awaits you on the 30th floor," she informed, handing her a VIP visitor badge. The panoramic elevator rose silently, and Emily watched the city grow beneath her feet. Chicago was truly a city of contrast, she thought. From above, it was impossible to distinguish where the outskirts ended and the financial center began. It was all one thing, a living, pulsating organism. "Emily," Helen Vasquez's voice surprised her when the elevator doors opened. "I'm glad you came. Come, Richard is waiting for us." For us? So it wouldn't be a one-on-one meeting with Walker. The meeting room was different from last time. Besides Walker and Helen, there were a few more people Emily didn't know. An elaborate breakfast table was arranged in a corner, and a large screen displayed some graphs and presentations. "Emily," began Walker, rising to greet her. "First, I want to apologize." The apology caught her off guard. The CEO of the country's largest technology company was apologizing to her. "Apologize because I let rigid processes and veiled prejudices prevent Walker from recognizing genuine talent. But we're here to correct that." Helen took the floor. "Emily, we've seen what you've been doing in Oakwood Heights. The way you're using technology to transform the reality of small entrepreneurs is exactly the kind of innovation we need." Walker made a gesture, and the presentation on the screen changed. "We're creating something new at Walker. Our department focused on identifying and developing unconventional talents. People who, like you, have the power to revolutionize the market precisely because they think differently." Emily felt her heart race. She was beginning to understand where this conversation was heading. "We want you to lead this department," added Helen, "not just as an employee, but as director of the Social and Technological Innovation Center." The silence that followed was deafening. Emily looked at each face in the room, searching for signs that this was a joke, but everyone seemed deadly serious. I don't even have a college degree," she finally managed to stammer. "Steve Jobs didn't either," replied Walker with a smile. "What you have is more valuable: vision, determination, and the ability to create real solutions for real problems." "Besides," continued Helen, "Walker will fund your formal education. College, postgraduate, whatever you want to study. But in the meantime, we want you to start implementing your ideas on a large scale." Emily thought of Mrs. Donner, of Mr. George, of all the small business owners who had trusted her. She thought of her grandmother, her distant parents, all those who had once doubted that someone from the outskirts could go so far. Emily asked for a day to think about the proposal. She left Walker with her head spinning, carrying a folder full of documents detailing the project for the new department. On the bus ride home, she opened the folder and began to read every detail of what would be her new role. The Social and Technological Innovation Center wouldn't just be another corporate department. It would be a talent incubator, a space to identify and develop people with innovative potential who, due to various circumstances, never had access to traditional market opportunities. "It's a lot of responsibility," she murmured to herself, as the bus wound through the streets of Chicago. Her first stop was at the bakery. She needed to talk with Mrs. Donner, who more than a boss had become a mentor in recent years. "Of course you have to accept," exclaimed Mrs. Donner after hearing the whole story. "But with one condition. You can't abandon our little system. It's become the bakery's darling." Emily laughed, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. "Actually, Mrs. Donner, I was thinking of expanding the system, making it a pilot project for the new department. Imagine how many other bakeries, markets, and small businesses we could help." Mrs. Donner's eyes shone. "That's my girl, always thinking big." The next stop was at the technical course. She found teacher Jennifer correcting assignments in the teacher's room. "Emily, this is extraordinary," said Jennifer after hearing about the proposal. "But I see you're hesitant. What's worrying you?" "What if I'm not ready? What if I disappoint?" "Everyone?" Jennifer put the tests aside and looked directly into her students' eyes. "Remember your first day of class here. You barely knew how to turn on a computer. Today, you develop systems that are changing people's lives. You're never ready. You become ready by doing." At the call center, her supervisor was genuinely happy with the news. "I knew you wouldn't stay here forever," he said, with a proud smile. "But before you go, how about implementing those improvements to the system that you always suggested?" The Mai. Last stop was at home. Mrs. Betty was sitting in her rocking chair, knitting a scarf despite the Chicago heat. "Grandma," began Emily, sitting at her grandmother's feet as she did when she was a child. "I need your honest opinion. She told everything: the proposal, the salary, which was more than she had ever dreamed of earning, the benefits, the opportunity to study, everything. Mrs. Betty listened in silence, her knitting needles dancing in the air. "You know what? Your mother told me before leaving," the lady finally spoke, "that her biggest fear was that you would be stuck here as she was, that you wouldn't have the chance to show the world your worth." Emily felt tears forming in her eyes. It was rare for her grandmother to talk about her mother. "Now tell me, what scares you more? Accepting this proposal and maybe failing, or refusing and spending the rest of your life imagining what could have been?" Mrs. Betty's question hit Emily like lightning. Suddenly, everything became clear. She took her cell phone and typed a message to Helen Vasquez. "I accept the challenge. When do we start?" The response came almost instantly. "Great, tomorrow 9 a.m. Bring your ideas and your courage. We're going to revolutionize the market." That night, Emily couldn't sleep again. But this time it wasn't anxiety, it was excitement. Her laptop was open on the table, several browser tabs showing research on team management, agile methodologies, success cases of social inclusion through technology. Emily's first day as director of the Social and Technological Innovation Center at Walker began differently from all others. There was no more alarm at 5 a.m., nor the cold shower, nor the stale bread. Instead, a driver waited in front of her house sent by the company to pick her up. "You don't need all this," she had told Helen when she learned about the benefits she would receive, but the director was firm. "Emily, you are now a Walker executive. We need to ensure you have all the conditions to do your job in the best possible way." Upon arriving at the company, she was directed to her new office, a spacious room on the 28th floor with a view of the city. On the desk, a latest model laptop awaited her, along with a welcome card signed by the entire board. "First meeting in 30 minutes, informed her new assistant, a young woman named Patricia. "The team is eager to meet you." Team? Emily was still getting used to the idea that she would have people working under her leadership. Helen had given her carte blanche to assemble her team with just one condition: she should seek talent in the unconventional places. The meeting room was full when she entered. Curious faces observed her, some admiring, others skeptical. Emily took a deep breath and began, "Good morning, everyone. My name is Emily Porter, and yes, I am the rollerblade girl." Some discreet laughter broke the ice. Emily continued, "But today I'm not here to talk about rollerblades. I'm here to talk about transformation." For the next 40 minutes, she presented her vision for the center. She talked about the pilot project she had developed in Oakwood Heights, about how simple technology could transform small businesses, about the importance of looking for talents that the market traditionally ignored. "Our first mission," she announced, "will be to expand the system we created at the bakery to a network of small businesses. But we don't just want to provide technology. We want to empower people from these communities so they themselves can develop and maintain these systems." Lucas, who had been her first hire as technical coordinator, complimented by explaining the technical aspects of the project. Other team members began to contribute ideas, and soon the room was vibrating with creative energy. At the end of the day, Emily was exhausted but fulfilled. Her cell phone wouldn't stop receiving messages. Mrs. Donner wanting to know how the first day had been, her grandmother asking if she had eaten properly, Jennifer sending links to courses that might be useful. When everyone had already gone home, Helen appeared in her office. "So, how was the first day?" "Intense," replied Emily, smiling. "But amazing. You know what impressed me the most? How receptive people here are to different ideas." Helen sat on the edge of the desk. "Not all are. There's still a lot of resistance in some sectors. Some directors still think this is a project doomed to failure. That's exactly why we need to have quick results," replied Emily, showing Helen a spreadsheet on her laptop. "I've already mapped 50 small businesses that can benefit from our system in the next 3 months. And we've identified 10 young programmers from communities who can be trained to provide local support." Helen smiled, impressed with her newest director's proactivity. "You know, Emily, when Richard insisted on creating this department, many thought it was just a marketing move. But now I'm seeing that it's much more than that. It's a quiet revolution, added Emily, one that happens line of code by line of code, business by business, life by life. 3 months passed since Emily took over the direction of the Social and Technological Innovation Center. The pilot project had expanded beyond initial expectations. More than 70 small businesses were already using the system, and 15 young programmers from the communities were in training. However, not everything was rosy. On a Wednesday morning, Emily found her team agitated upon arriving at the office. Patricia, her assistant, was waiting with a worried expression. "What happened?" asked Emily, sensing something was wrong. "You better see for yourself," replied Patricia, handing her a copy of Walker's internal newspaper. In the opinion column, an article signed by Mark Reynolds, HR director, questioned the real effectiveness of the new department. The text, although diplomatically on the surface, was a veiled criticism of the company's investment in experimental projects of dubious return. "He doesn't stop there," continued Patricia. "A document is circulating among some executives suggesting that the center's budget be redirected to more strategic areas." Emily sat in her chair, absorbing the information. She knew she would face resistance, but she didn't expect such a direct attack. Lucas entered the room at that moment carrying his laptop. "Already seen the article? But I have something that might help," he said, opening a presentation. "I compiled the data from the last 3 months. The impact of the project is much greater than we imagined. The numbers were impressive. Small businesses that adopted the system registered an average increase of 40% in revenue. The loan default rate among these merchants had dropped to almost 0. And most surprisingly, 3 of the young programmers in training had already developed their own applications that were being tested by other companies." "This is incredible, Lucas," exclaimed Emily. "But we need more. We need to show that we're not just creating a social project, we're developing a new business model." That afternoon, Emily had a scheduled meeting with Helen Vasquez. Upon entering the director's room, she found not only Helen but also Richard Walker. "I see you've already read Mark's article," began Helen without beating around the bush. "I read it, and I also heard about the document." "That's circulating," replied Emily, keeping calm. "That's why I brought this." She opened her laptop and began to present the results compiled by Lucas, adding a cost-benefit analysis she had prepared during lunch. "Interesting," murmured Walker, who until then had been silent. "But Mark has a point. How can we ensure that this is sustainable in the long term?" Emily smiled. It was exactly the question she expected. "That's why I came prepared with a proposal," she said, opening a new presentation. "What started as a system for small businesses has evolved. We've discovered that our users have needs in common with large retail chains. Inventory management, financial control, and customer relationship problems are universal." She paused, observing the reactions. "We're developing an enterprise version of the system with specific functionalities for large companies. 3 supermarket chains have already shown interest in testing the platform. And the best part, all the development is being done by the young people we trained, supervised by our technical team." Walker leaned forward, visibly interested. "Are you saying you transformed a social project into a potential business unit?" "Exactly," replied Emily, "but keeping the social DNA of the project. Part of the revenue generated from corporate versions will be reinvested in training more young people and developing solutions for small entrepreneurs." Helen couldn't contain a smile. It was exactly the kind of disruptive thinking she expected when she supported the creation of the center. The news that large retail chains were interested in the system developed by the Social and Technological Innovation Center spread quickly through the halls of Walker. What was previously seen as an experimental project was beginning to attract market attention. Emily decided to organize an event to present the results, but not in traditional corporate molds. The chosen location was the community center of Oakwood Heights, and the presenters would be the beneficiaries of the project themselves. "Are you sure about this?" questioned Patricia, concerned about the logistics of taking executives to the outskirts. "The directors are used to 5-star hotels and convention centers." "Precisely because of that," replied Emily. They need to see the reality where transformation happens. The day of the event arrived. The community center had been transformed. A space was prepared for practical demonstrations of the system, another for presentations by young programmers, and an area was dedicated to small entrepreneurs who used the platform. Mrs. Donner was there, proud, showing on a tablet how the system had revolutionized her bakery. Before I lost product every day, I didn't really know what sold more. Now, I have everything controlled at my fingertips. The young programmers, dressed in project t-shirts, demonstrated the functionalities they had developed. Peter, a 19-year-old boy who 6 months ago barely knew how to turn on a computer, presented with ease an artificial intelligence module he had created for demand prediction. Mark Reynolds, the HR director, arrived with a grumpy face. But as he circulated through the event, his countenance changed, especially when one of the young programmers recognized him. "You're the HR director, aren't you?" asked the young man. "I read your article in the internal newspaper. I wanted to show you something." It was Raphael, one of the first participants in the program. He led Mark to his computer and showed a dashboard he had developed especially for HR departments, integrating talent management with predictive profile analysis. This is impressive," murmured Mark, genuinely surprised. "Where did you learn to do this?" "Right here in the program," replied Raphael. "Emily taught us that technology is just a tool. The important thing is understanding the problem we want to solve." On the other side of the hall, Richard Walker was chatting animatedly with a lady who sold homemade cakes. She explained how the system had helped expand her business to online sales, and now she supplied cafeterias in the city center. Helen found Emily observing everything from a corner. "You know what's most amazing," she said. "It's not just the impact on businesses. It's seeing how these people have regained their dignity, their protagonism." Emily nodded, emotional. "And this is just the beginning. We have plans to expand to other communities, create technological training centers, develop new solutions." "Emily," called Lucas, interrupting the conversation, "you need to see this." On the main screen, a video conference was being established. The face that appeared on the screen made Emily freeze. It was the CEO of one of the largest retail chains in North America. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice echoing through the now silent hall, "we've closely followed the development of this project in recent months. What you've managed to do here, uniting technology, social impact, and practical results, is exactly what we've been looking for." He made a dramatic pause before continuing. "We want not only to adopt the system in all our units, but also to establish a partnership to expand this technological training model to all communities where we have a presence." The proposal from the retail chain dropped like a bomb in the corporate market. In less than a week, the story of the Social and Technological Innovation Center was in the main business magazines of the country. Emily, the girl who had arrived on rollerblades for a job interview, was now portrayed as an example of innovative leadership. "Look at this," said Lucas, showing a magazine to Emily in her office. "You're on the 30 under 30 list, the most influential young people in the market." Emily took the magazine with a mixture of pride and embarrassment. In the photo, she appeared smiling with some of the young programmers from the project in the background. The article highlighted not only her professional achievements, but mainly the social impact of her work. "The most important thing isn't my name on that list," she replied. "It's seeing that they're finally understanding that innovation can come from anywhere." That afternoon, she had an important meeting with her expanded team. Walker's auditorium was packed. Besides her original team, there were representatives from the communities where the project would be implemented through the partnership with the retail chain. "Our biggest challenge now," began Emily, "is to scale without losing the essence. We don't just want to install systems, we want to create centers of excellence in technology in each community." Patricia raised her hand. "But how will we ensure the quality of training in so many different places?" "Good question," replied Emily, projecting a map on the screen. "That's why we've developed the concept of technological ambassadors. Each person we trained in the original program will lead a new training center." Raphael, the young man who had impressed Mark Reynolds with his HR dashboard, would be the first ambassador. He was already organizing a group of 20 young people in his community, preparing them for the training program. But there's more, continued Emily. Each center will have a specialty. While some focus on system development, others will specialize in data analysis, artificial intelligence, or interface design. The idea was to create an interconnected network of knowledge where each community could contribute with its specific expertise to larger projects. It was a revolutionary model of talent training and development. In the middle of the presentation, Helen discreetly entered the auditorium. She observed with satisfaction how Emily had evolved as a leader. Her presence was natural. Her authority came from knowledge and empathy, not hierarchy. After the meeting, Helen called Emily for a conversation. "The board wants you to present the project at the company's annual convention next month in New York," she announced. "It will be your chance to show the world what we're doing here." Emily felt butterflies in her stomach. One thing was to speak to her team or local entrepreneurs. Quite another was to present to executives from all over the world. "And there's one more thing," continued Helen hesitantly. "We received an interesting call today. A person who says they know you is looking for contact." Emily's heart accelerated. Something in Helen's tone made her suspect. "Who?" "Your mother." The world seemed to stop for an instant. After more than 10 years without news, why was her mother trying to contact her now, and just when everything in her professional life was going right? "She saw your story in the media," explained Helen gently. "She's living in Boston, working as a researcher at a university. She said she would very much like to meet you when you're in New York." Emily sat down, trying to process the information. Her mother, who had left when she was a teenager, promising to send news and never giving a sign of life, now wanted a reunion. What should she do? The news about her mother shook Emily more than she would like to admit. That night, sitting in the small living room at home with Mrs. Betty, she tried to understand her own feelings. "She was always like that," said Mrs. Betty, her agile fingers working on the knitting as always. "Your mother always had that way, appearing and disappearing like a new moon, but this time she stayed away too long without showing her face." Emily observed her grandmother, noticing for the first time some similarities with her mother, the same way of furrowing her brow when thoughtful, the same long and delicate fingers. "Do you think I should meet with her in New York?" Mrs. Betty stopped her knitting, looking directly at her granddaughter. "My child, some doors we need to open, even without knowing what's on the other side. If you don't open it, the doubt will corrode more than any disappointment." The next day at the office, Emily tried to concentrate on preparing for the convention, but her thoughts kept returning to her mother. Lucas, noticing her distraction, suggested a break for coffee. "You know," he said as they walked to the cafeteria, "sometimes life puts everything together on purpose. You're going to present a project that talks about transformation and reconnection, just when you have a chance to reconnect with your own past." Emily smiled. Lucas had this gift of finding meaning in coincidences. What if she's only interested now because I appeared in magazines? Because I became somebody? What if she always wanted contact but didn't know how? What if she was ashamed? What if she was waiting for you to be well established so it wouldn't seem like she came back out of interest? Replied Lucas. We could spend all day on what ifs. Preparation for the convention continued at full speed. Emily decided to do something different. Instead of a traditional presentation, she was organizing a live demonstration, connecting by video conference all the training centers that were already in operation. In one of the preparation meetings, Richard Walker made an interesting suggestion. What if we did something even bolder? How about announcing at the convention that Walker will create a specific investment fund for social impact startups managed by your department? The idea was brilliant. The fund would not only provide capital for new projects, but also mentoring and technical support from the center's team. It was the chance to multiply the impact of the work they were doing. Between one meeting and another, Emily finally gathered courage and responded to her mother's contact through Helen. She agreed to meet her in New York, but proposed something specific. She invited her to attend her presentation at the convention. I want her to see who I've become, she explained to Helen. Not out of pride, but because this story isn't just mine, it's everyone's who stood by my side when she wasn't there. The response came the same day. Her mother not only accepted the invitation to the presentation, but revealed that she was developing a digital inclusion project at the university where she worked. She wanted to talk about possible partnerships. Typical of her, commented Mrs. Betty when Emily told her, always mixing the personal with the professional, just like you, my child. Her grandmother's observation made Emily reflect. Perhaps she and her mother weren't so different after all. Both sought to transform realities through technology. Both had left their comfort zones in search of something greater. 2 weeks before the convention, Emily decided to make a surprise visit to the community center of Oakwood Heights, where everything had begun. She found Raphael teaching a group of teenagers, showing them how to develop mobile applications. "You know what's coolest?" said one of the students when he saw her enter. "We're not just learning to program, we're learning that we can dream big." Those words kept echoing in Emily's mind. It was exactly what she needed to show at the convention, that technology wasn't just about codes and systems, but about transforming dreams into reality. The week before the trip to New York was intense. Emily divided her time between final, preparations for the convention presentation, and anxiety about the reunion with her mother. In her office at Walker, she was rehearsing her speech for the 10th time when Patricia entered with surprising news. "Emily, you won't believe it. The Silicon Valley people found out about your presentation. 3 big technology companies confirmed their presence just to hear you." The pressure was increasing. It was no longer just a corporate presentation. It was becoming an event that could define the future of the project and consequently of hundreds of young people who depended on it. At home, Mrs. Betty helped her granddaughter choose clothes for the trip. Among new dresses and suits, bought especially for the occasion, her grandmother found something at the bottom of the wardrobe: the old rollerblades. "Take them," said the lady, cleaning the dust off the rollerblades, "to remember where you came from." Emily took the rollerblades, moved. They were more than a pair of worn wheels. They were a symbol of her journey. On the eve of the trip, she made a point of visiting each of the training centers. In Oakwood Heights, she found Raphael guiding his students on a special project. They were developing a virtual presentation that would be transmitted during the convention. "We want to show them that technology doesn't have a fixed address," explained Raphael, proud. "That innovation can be born anywhere, as long as there's opportunity." At the call center where she had worked, her former supervisor received her with a tight hug. The system she had suggested before leaving was working perfectly, significantly improving the working conditions of the attendants. "You didn't just change your life," he said. "You changed that of many people you don't even know." At Mrs. Donna's bakery, a surprise, the small business owners of the neighborhood had organized a farewell party. Each brought a dish, and between snacks and cakes, they shared stories of how the system had transformed their businesses. "We brought a gift," announced Mrs. Rose, the florist. It was a genuine leather portfolio with Emily's initials engraved. "For you to carry your documents in New York with style." Emily felt tears in her eyes, but this must have cost a fortune. "It was a collection among all of us," explained Mr. George from the small market. "Each gave a little of the extra profit they had thanks to your system." Back at the office late at night, Emily found Helen still working. "Shouldn't you be resting for the trip tomorrow?" asked the director. "I can't," admitted Emily. "I keep thinking about so many things. The presentation, the Silicon Valley companies, my mother." Helen put her papers aside and sat with Emily. "You know, when I saw you arriving on rollerblades that day, I noticed something special. It wasn't just determination. It was authenticity. You never tried to be someone else to fit in. That's what makes your project so powerful." "But what if I can't convey that message there? What if my mother—" "Emily," Helen gently interrupted, "stop trying to control everything. Sometimes life prepares better surprises than we could plan." That night at home, Emily couldn't sleep. She stayed in the living room looking at old photos in an album that her grandmother kept. There was one in particular that caught her attention. her still a child next to her mother, both smiling in front of an old computer. "Your mother was the one who taught you to like technology," said Mrs. Betty, who had woken up and found her granddaughter in the living room. "She always said that computers were magical. They could transform numbers into dreams." Emily smiled, realizing for the first time that perhaps her passion for technology was a maternal heritage. Had her mother followed her own dream in Boston? Had she also found her way to transform numbers into dreams? New York received Emily with a cold, sunny morning. From the taxi that took her from the airport to the hotel, she observed Manhattan's skyscrapers reflecting the sunlight, so different from the buildings in Chicago. In her suitcase, besides the new clothes and the leather portfolio gifted by the merchants, were the old rollerblades, her lucky charm. The hotel where the convention would be held was imposing. In the lobby, executives from all over the world circulated with their badges and tablets. Emily was received by Sarah Thompson, the event coordinator, who conducted her to her suite. "Your presentation is one of the most anticipated events," informed Sarah. "We had to change to the main auditorium to accommodate all those interested." After settling in, Emily decided to reconnoiter the location. On the way to the auditorium, she found Richard Walker chatting with some executives. "Ah, Emily," he called, "come meet some interesting people." The executives were representatives of Silicon Valley companies. One of them in particular caught her attention. "Your project reminded me a lot of the early days of the Valley," he said, "when we still believed that technology could change the world for the better, not just generate profits." Back in her room, Emily received a message. Her mother had arrived in New York and was staying at a nearby hotel. She suggested breakfast the next day before the presentation. Emily sat on the bed, her heart racing. She took her phone and called the only person who could calm her at that moment. "Grandma?" "Hi, my child. Did you arrive well?" Mrs. Betty's voice, even through the phone, brought immediate comfort. Emily told her about the hotel, the executives, her mother's message. "You know what you have to do," said her grandmother. "Listen more than you speak. Sometimes silence says more than 1,000 words." The next morning, Emily arrived early at the cafe indicated by her mother, a small, discreet establishment away from the bustle of the big hotels. She chose a table by the window and waited, her heart beating so hard it seemed to want to jump out of her chest. When the cafe door opened, Emily immediately recognized the woman who entered. Anna Claire had aged, of course, but maintained the same elegant posture that Emily remembered from childhood. Her hair, once as black as her daughter's, now displayed gray strands. Emily. The meeting was less dramatic than Emily had imagined. There were no tears or cinematic hugs, just two women sitting in a cafe in New York, trying to rebuild a bridge over a decade of silence. Anna Claire talked about her work in Boston, about how she had specialized in educational technology, developing programs to make education more accessible in underprivileged communities. "When I saw your story, the rollerblades, the social project, everything, it was like looking in a mirror of the past," she said. "You're doing what I always dreamed of doing, but never had enough courage." Emily listened, remembering her grandmother's advice about the value of silence. Her mother continued, "I know I abandoned you. I know nothing justifies having cut contact for so long, but when I saw you in the media, developing a project that unites technology and social impact, I realized that somehow, even absent, I managed to pass on what was best in me." It was then that Emily noticed something on her mother's table, a folder with the logo of the university where she worked. Inside, there was a partnership proposal between her educational technology project and Walker's Social and Technological Innovation Center. "You didn't come just to see me, did you?" asked Emily, an ironic smile on her lips. Anna Claire blushed slightly. "The personal reconnection was the main reason, I swear. But when I saw the reach of your work, I thought that maybe we could build something together, unite our experiences to amplify the impact even more." The main auditorium of the hotel was packed. Executives, entrepreneurs, and journalists from around the world occupied every available seat. In the front row, Richard Walker and Helen Vasquez waited anxiously. A few rows behind, Anna Claire adjusted herself in her chair, firmly holding the folder with her partnership proposal. Backstage, Emily took deep breaths, adjusting the microphone on her new blazer. Patricia had just confirmed that the connection with the training centers in Chicago was established. They would participate live in the presentation. 5 minutes, announced Sarah Thompson, the event coordinator. Emily opened her leather portfolio, the gift from the Oakwood Heights merchants, and took out something that surprised her assistant, the old rollerblades. "Are you going to use those on stage?" asked Patricia, concerned. "No," smiled Emily. "I just need them nearby to remember where I came from and why I'm here." The murmur in the auditorium diminished as the lights dimmed. On the giant screen behind the stage, the Walker logo shone in shades of blue. Sarah went on stage to make the introduction. Today we have the privilege of knowing a story that is redefining the relationship between technology and social impact. A story that began with a pair of rollerblades and a job interview, and today is transforming entire communities. Emily observed the audience through the curtain. Her heart raced at seeing so many important faces from the technology world. But then her gaze found something familiar. On one of the side screens, live from Chicago, was Mrs. Donna in her bakery, surrounded by other neighborhood merchants. On another screen, Raphael and his students at the community center waved enthusiastically. "Ladies and gentlemen, Emily Porter." The moment had arrived. Emily walked to the center of the stage, feeling the weight of each step. But when she reached the microphone and saw all those expectant faces, something changed inside her. She was no longer the nervous rollerblade girl with an interview. She was a leader, about to share a vision of the future. "Good afternoon, everyone," she began, her voice firm and clear. "Many of you must be wondering, what does a girl who went to a job interview on rollerblades have to teach the corporate world?" A soft laugh ran through the auditorium. Emily smiled and continued. "The answer is everything. Because when you don't have resources, you learn to be creative. When you come from the outskirts, you learn to see opportunities where others see problems. When you know the reality of ordinary people, you understand that technology only makes sense if it transforms real lives." With a gesture, she activated the side screens. On one, Mrs. Donna began to demonstrate how the system had revolutionized her bakery. On another, Raphael presented the applications developed by his students. What you're seeing is not just a social responsibility project. It's a new business model, a model where social impact and financial results are not conflicting objectives, but complementary ones. Emily presented the numbers. The average 40% increase in revenue for small businesses, the reduction in default rates, the interest from large retail chains. But her eyes really shone when she talked about the young programmers. "In 6 months, we trained more developers in the outskirts than many universities do in an entire year. And do you know why? Because we're not just teaching code, we're giving people back the right to dream." It was then that she made the announcement that no one expected. Today, Walker is not just presenting results. We're launching the largest investment fund in social technology in North America, a fund that will identify, develop, and finance projects that use technology to transform realities. The auditorium exploded in applause. Richard Walker smiled proudly. Helen discreetly wiped a tear, and Anna Claire observed her daughter with a mixture of admiration and regret, realizing how much she had missed in the years of absence. The impact of the presentation was immediate. Still on stage, Emily received messages on her cell phone. Executives wanted to schedule meetings. Investors offered partnerships. Journalists requested exclusive interviews. But what caught her attention the most was a notification from the Community Center app. The young programmers had just launched an update to the system, implementing improvements that not even she had thought of. Backstage after the presentation, the first person to hug her was Helen. "You not only exceeded our expectations," said the director. "You redefined what we expect from a technology company in the 21st century." Richard Walker approached next, accompanied by 2 Silicon Valley executives. "They have an interesting proposal," said Walker. "They want to replicate our model in the United States, starting with underprivileged communities in Silicon Valley." It was ironic, thought Emily. the cradle of world technology wanting to learn from a project born in the outskirts of Chicago. Anna Claire waited for everyone to move away before approaching. In her hands, she still held the folder with her partnership proposal. "I think this has become too small after what I saw today," she said, a shy smile on her lips. "But maybe we can think of something bigger, something that unites the university's experience with the reach of your project." Emily looked at her mother, realizing for the first time that she no longer felt anger or resentment, just a professional curiosity about how they could collaborate. "We can start small," she replied. "Maybe a pilot project in Boston." The rest of the day was a whirlwind of meetings and commitments. Emily barely had time to check the messages coming from Chicago. Mrs. Betty had sent an emotional audio saying how proud she was. Lucas sent photos of the celebration at the Walker office in Chicago. At night, alone in her hotel room, Emily finally had a moment to process everything that had happened. Sitting on the edge of the bed, she took the old rollerblades and observed them under the soft light of the lamp. Her phone rang. It was a video call from Mrs. Donner. "Girl, you won't believe it," exclaimed the baker as soon as Emily answered. "After your presentation, 3 people came here wanting to know how the system works. One of them owns a chain of bakeries." Emily smiled. It was exactly what she always wanted, for her project, to create a cascade effect, inspiring others to see opportunities where before they only saw limitations. The next morning, before returning to Chicago, Emily had one last commitment: breakfast with her mother. This time she chose the location, a small cafe in Brooklyn very similar to Mrs. Donner's bakery. "You know," began Anna Claire as she stirred her coffee, "I spent years blaming myself for leaving. I thought I had abandoned you to your own luck. But yesterday, seeing you on that stage, I realized that maybe my absence forced you to develop a strength you didn't know you had." Emily considered her mother's words. "Maybe," she replied. "But I prefer to think that each experience, good or bad, prepares us for something greater. The rollerblades reminded me of that." The rollerblades. Yes, they weren't just a means of transportation when my bicycle broke. They were a symbol that there's always a way even when it seems that all doors are closed. Anna Claire took her bag, not the one with the partnership proposal, but an older one that Emily hadn't noticed before. "I brought something for you," she said, taking out a yellowed photograph. In it, a young Anna Claire was rollerblading on a Boston street carrying university books. The return to Chicago was different from any other trip Emily had ever made. On the plane, as she flew over oceans, she held 2 photographs. The old one, which her mother had given her, showing Anna Claire rollerblading in Boston, and a new one taken at the Brooklyn Cafe with mother and daughter together after so many years. But that wasn't all that occupied her thoughts. In her portfolio, there were now partnership contracts with Silicon Valley companies, a draft collaboration with Boston University, and most importantly, the official document of Walker's new investment fund for social technology projects. When the plane landed in Chicago, a surprise awaited her. The airport hall was full. Not only her Walker team was there, but also the young programmers, the neighborhood merchants, her grandmother, and even Mark Reynolds, the HR director who had once been so skeptical. "Welcome back," they all shouted in unison. Mrs. Betty was the first to hug her. "So, my child, how was meeting your mother?" "It was different from what I expected, Grandma, in a good way." On the way home, Emily asked the driver to make a detour through Oakwood Heights. She wanted to see how things were after her absence. To her surprise, she found the community center bustling, even at that hour. "We couldn't wait for you to return," explained Raphael, who was coordinating a night class. "After your presentation, the number of enrollments tripled. We had to open extra classes." At Mrs. Donner's bakery, now closed at that hour, a banner still hung saying, "A revolution started here." Emily smiled, remembering how everything had begun with a simple inventory control system. At home, after Mrs. Betty went to sleep, Emily sat in the small living room with her laptop. She began to write an email to her mother. Not a formal email about partnerships and projects, but a personal one, talking about her impressions of New York, about how, Strange and familiar it was to be in the same space as her after so long. As she wrote, a notification popped up on the screen. It was a message from Lucas. He had compiled all the results of the New York presentation. The impact had been even greater than they imagined. 3 large companies had already confirmed investments in the fund, doubling the initial expected value. But what caught her attention the most was a specific piece of data. In the 24 hours after her presentation, more than 1,000 small businesses in different parts of the United States had signed up to participate in the program. They weren't just bakeries and small markets. There were also artisans, small rural producers, cooperatives. What started with rollerblades is turning into a marathon, wrote Lucas. Emily smiled at the metaphor. She closed the laptop and went to her room, where the old rollerblades now occupied a place of honor on the shelf. Next to them, she placed the 2 photographs, the one of her mother in Boston and the new one of the 2 together. Her cell phone vibrated, a message from Helen. Meeting tomorrow 9 a.m. We need to start planning the international expansion. Oh, and Richard wants to discuss an idea. Transforming the center into an independent business unit with you as CEO. Emily read the message several times. CEO? She who less than a year ago was arriving on rollerblades for a job interview? It seemed surreal. But then she remembered her grandmother's words. Some doors we need to open, even without knowing what's on the other side. 6 months after the presentation in New York, the Social and Technological Innovation Center had transformed into something much bigger than anyone could have imagined. Now, an independent business unit, although still part of the Walker Group, the project had offices in 3 countries and more than 50 training centers spread across different communities. On a special morning, Emily was back at the place where it all began, Mrs. Donner's bakery. But this time she wasn't there to work. She was there to inaugurate the first Oakwood Heights Center for Technology and Entrepreneurship, installed in a renovated building next to the bakery. "Who would have thought, huh?" commented Mrs. Donner, serving coffee to the inauguration guests. "My bakery became a tourist spot." The new center was much more than a training space. It was a complete innovation hub with state-of-the-art computers, co-working space, prototyping laboratory, and most importantly, an incubator for social startups. Among the special guests was Anna Claire, who had flown from Boston especially for the event. In recent months, mother and daughter had developed not only a reconstituted personal relationship, but also a thriving professional partnership. The educational technology program that Anna Claire was developing at the university was now an integral part of the curriculum at the training centers. "You managed to realize the dream that I didn't have the courage to pursue," Anna Claire told her daughter during the ceremony. Richard Walker, who was also present, called Emily for a special moment, the signing of the document that formalized the independence of the center, now renamed Tech Change Global. "You know what impresses me the most?" said Walker as he signed the papers. "It's not the success of the project itself, but how you never lost the essence. You remained the same person who arrived on rollerblades to that interview." The inauguration ceremony was broadcast live to all training centers. On each screen, smiling faces of young programmers, small entrepreneurs, and students showed that the transformation was real and multiplied exponentially. Raphael, now Technology Director of Tech Change, presented the company's newest creation, a platform that connected all the centers in a collaborative development network. "Each line of code we write here can help a business on the other side of the world," he explained. "It's technology without borders, exactly as you always dreamed, Emily." At the end of the ceremony, when most of the guests had already left, Emily found a moment to be alone in the new center. She walked through the corridors, observing the photos on the walls, a timeline that told the story of the project, from the rollerblades to that moment. Mrs. Betty found her there, contemplative. "What are you thinking about, my child?" "About how life comes full circle, Grandma. About how sometimes we need to lose something to find something greater." Her grandmother smiled, understanding. "And about how sometimes we need to leave to be able to return stronger." Emily nodded, thinking about her mother, her own journey, all the paths that had brought her there. She took her cell phone and opened the camera. She wanted to register that moment. In the frame, she captured not only the modern space of the center, but also, through the window, Mrs. Donner's bakery, where everything had begun. It was an image that perfectly symbolized her story, the union between the new and the traditional, between technology and humanity. You know what I learned from all this,